There are over 700,000 sexual offenders in the United States alone. With all the social media these days, how can we protect ourselves and our children from these despicable predators?
Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast, where we discuss criminal cases that involve some factor of abuse. Our goal is to spread awareness of abuse that could be taking place around any of us and encourage everyone to take responsibility and report if they see a child or an adult being abused. Fatima Avalika was a 13-year-old girl. One day, she was starting her day like any other. She got ready for school and got into her dad's car. They were getting close to the school when suddenly they saw police lights and realized they were being pulled over. The police started talking to her father, Romulo. They informed him that he was under arrest. Fatima began recording with her phone. She couldn't hold back the tears as she watched them cuff her father and put him into the back of the police car. The reason for his arrest was nothing violent or harmful to anyone else. He was arrested because he was an undocumented Mexican immigrant. Well, welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Rosie.
And Rosie's missing her voice this week. So I'm going to take the lead on this one and just let Rosie chime in whenever she feels like it.
All right, thank you.
So this is about the current events. It's kind of a different episode than what we normally do. Instead of telling one story and focusing on it, we're talking about the current events going on with the zero tolerance policy on the border, the Mexican border with the immigration, because it just kind of resonated with me when I was hearing it on the news, and I wanted to do a little research into it and the personal stories that were involved in it. So if you haven't heard the news recently, there's been a tightening down of the zero tolerance border policy. Many people have been getting arrested, and their children have been getting separated from them at an alarming rate. Zero tolerance policies are where the law is applied in a strict and uncompromising manner with no regard for the circumstances.
Wow, it seems really harsh.
Yeah, it seems like a huge prejudice against Mexicans when you look at the big picture here. Understandably, the U.S. is in a tough spot. There is a lot of sex and drug trafficking that comes out of Mexico. But instead of trying to address the source of the problem, the actual leaders of the trafficking rings, they put a blanket law over the whole country and generalize all Mexicans as criminals if they enter the U.S. without the citizenship or proper documentation. Which is true. They are criminals. It is against the U.S. law to do that, but should it be a law?
Well,
I don't know.
It makes sense for different reasons, but if you consider these people's stories, their backgrounds, and their circumstances of where they were formerly living, then we probably have different ideas about it.
Yeah.
Depending on the family and the individual person.
Bye Bye Blackbird. The last words spoken by bank robber John Dillinger? Or were they? Here at Famous Last Words, we take a deeper look into the last thing famous or infamous people said in their final moments. You may know about the quotes, but now you'll understand what it really meant. Was it heartfelt, passionate, philosophical, or was it complete nonsense? Find us on Twitter at Last Words Show. Find our show on Podbean, Wooshka, and Anchor. Plus, wherever your ears enjoy podcasts.
Personally, I feel like putting zero tolerance policy on the entire nation of Mexico and criminalizing them just for crossing onto another part of the earth that some greedy men in the past laid claim to is really ignoring the real issues of humanity.
Right. It just doesn't seem ethical, especially for these kids.
Yeah, and we'll get into a few personal stories later, but today, actually, June 20th, President Trump did sign an order to make it so that families wouldn't be separated anymore Whether that will be followed through on or not is still to be seen, but I'm actually really impressed with the fast action that was taken today so that immigrant families will no longer be separated. But there's still the issue of the trauma and damage that's already been done because of this, and it doesn't seem like anyone's going to be held accountable for that. So we'll get...
Who wants to take the blame?
Well, yeah, exactly. But if it was a crime committed by a citizen, someone would have to be punished.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's an injustice committed by the government, which time and time again happens, no one's held accountable. So it's just really kind of sad. But let's talk about some personal stories. Before we talk about the effects of how separating children from their parents can affect them later on in life, we're going to share a couple stories. First, the girl we talked about in the introduction, Fatima Avelika, she was a 13-year-old girl who had lived in the U.S. her whole life. Her father had been a chef in the U.S. for 25 years. And they were just going on with their lives, not hurting anyone. And her father, Romulo Avelika Gonzalez, was giving her a ride to school on a regular morning like any other. They were about 500 meters away from her school when police stopped them, cuffed her father, and took him away, leaving her in the car by herself. And you can find a video she took with her phone on YouTube. And in it she's sobbing and she's terrified. So that doesn't seem like the right way to handle. I mean, you shouldn't be arresting people when they're with their kids or when they're driving them to school.
Right. Like, were they watching from outside the house? Like, didn't they see the little girl get in the car? Why not wait till she's at school?
Yeah, if they would have waited like another 5 seconds. But anyway, he was taken into custody, and now his family's only able to see him twice a month for 1 hour at a time. So 2 hours a month to see your father. The way things are looking, he'll probably never be able to come home to his family again in the U.S. And Fatima is trying to prepare herself for life without her father. And she also has a 12-year-old sister. And in an interview, when the reporter asked if she had anything to say to Trump, she said, "Have some compassion." And it breaks my heart to see these girls cry and be so unsure of their future with their father. And that's where it really seems like the line is drawn. There's law and order, and then there's heart and compassion. A large portion of these people are not violent criminals. They're just trying to escape the violence of where they came from. And we'll see that in this next story. Alberto was from El Salvador, and in 2015, he and his son came into the United States, and his wife and daughter stayed back, and they planned to follow later. They left El Salvador because there were gangs ruling their neighborhoods in their hometown, and these gangs would demand rent from the families. If they paid the rent, the gangs would allow them to live for a certain set amount of time. But if they couldn't pay up, the gangs would kill people. And
my gosh, that sounds like a horror movie with Liam Neeson in it.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, I can't even imagine having that threat constantly in your mind.
Yeah.
Even if you just paid them for, the life rent or whatever you want to call it, you'd constantly be worrying about it.
Yeah, exactly. Alberto and his family saw people get killed by these gangs when they weren't able to afford to pay them. So it's such a terrifying way to live. So they were trying to escape that when they came to the U.S. seeking asylum. But yeah, they got arrested because they didn't have the proper documentation, and they were separated. And both of them, Alberto and his son, were jailed.
How old did you say the son was?
It didn't say.
Okay, but we can assume he was younger?
Yeah, I don't think he was old enough to talk yet.
Oh my goodness.
Because when they were finally reunited, the little boy hugged him and cried. And from that, Alberto discerned that his son had had a really rough time there. But the living conditions where they were held were pretty horrible too. They had to stay there overnight, and there was nothing to lay on. It was just a cold concrete floor, and instead of a blanket, they were given just a piece of plastic.
I mean, like one of those plastic blankets that holds in your body heat? Or what do you mean?
That he just said plastic. They were given plastic, so I don't know if that's like a tarp or those blankets that you're talking about are probably too fancy for this. Because the living conditions are literally the bare minimum. Because
So they're both separated at this time?
yeah, they were separated just for one night.
Okay.
But after this, the little boy hugged him and cried, and 3 years have passed since that, and the son still has severe separation anxiety. He has a hard time being apart from any of his family members. It's easy for us to sit here and just say he should tough it out, but he's a young child, and I remember having terrible separation anxiety up until I was 10, and I never went through anything like this.
Yeah, well, at such a young age, I mean, your mind it can be molded.
It's so moldable.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
That's true,
So strange.
usually.
I can't imagine what that's like.
Do you want to?
That could never happen to me.
It might.
Lock him away. He's pure evil. Or insane.
Or human. My name's Kate. I have worked as a forensic psychologist as well as in prisons and as a crisis clinician. My job was to figure out who gets locked up and who gets a key. To find the humanity in inhumane situations. So, are you sure you really want to know?
Yeah? Maybe.
Because by the end of the episodes, you just might end up thinking...
I felt better before I knew that.
You can find me at IWB Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, sometimes Instagram, or you can email me at iwbpodcast@gmail.com.
Even with this new order that's been signed to not separate families, what about the trauma that's already been caused to these children that no one will ever be held accountable for?
Mm-hmm.
Where does the gap between law and compassion, or economy and humanity, stop widening?
Yeah, damage has already been done.
So, this is a figure just from last month, May of 2018. Just in 2 weeks, between May 6th and May 19th, 658 children were separated from their parents at the border. And the age doesn't matter. When the children cry and wail, the staff is not allowed to hold or comfort them. They just want their mothers, and they don't understand what's happening.
Why isn't the staff allowed to hold them?
Because, I'm guessing because of maybe pedophilia laws, or it's because it's a messed up world we're living in.
Oh my gosh.
But, so, they're really just denying these children their ability to be comforted after these stressful situations. So, is your voice good enough to talk about how this can affect children mentally and physically?
Well, we'll see, won't we? So there's this thing in us called positive stress. When children experience brief and self-limited events of stress like a temper tantrum, fight or flight hormones rise. But a parent comforts them and they calm down, and the brain actually becomes resilient to that type of stress. That only happens when a child has a loving and caring adult with them. Separation from a loving parent or adult results in these events turning into toxic stress, where the fight or flight chemicals, like cortisol, remain high because the child has no comfort from an adult. These chemicals can destroy the synapses that enable a child to develop properly and can affect their ability to learn and even prevent them from being able to love. It's toxic to a child's brain.
Yeah, being exposed to this actually disrupts their development physically, and they initially don't develop language or basic motor skills if they don't have an adult around, and if they're exposed to all these toxic stress chemicals, and they could even appear like they're on the autism spectrum. Later on, there are adverse consequences that are exacerbated by this toxic stress, like heart disease, obesity, cancer, and rheumatoid arthritis.
Right. It's amazing that children can be given the basic necessities of life, but if you don't have love, it physically and mentally affects you like that.
Yeah, well, and that's what separates us from the animals, is we have this love and this conscience, and we're supposed to use it to take care of our children.
Well, except for my cats, they love, and I love them.
Yeah, but they don't care what happens to you.
Well, they do. They really do.
Okay. Well, this toxic stress can really rob a child of being healthy, successful adults because their ability to learn is impaired as well as their ability to love, and this could lead to a disconnect in empathy. And sadly, these are a lot of the traits we see in violent criminals and abusers. So, I mean, we see it all the time when people that commit terrible acts of violence and crime have had some kind of rocky childhood with their parents, or some kind of neglect, or something that caused them not to develop correctly.
Right.
So, there was a former Walmart called Casa Padre where they housed immigrant boys. It houses almost 1,500 boys, and a news article said it was eerily similar to a detention center. And it seems like they're having the same overcrowding problem as the prison system is that we see.
Yeah, it jumped by almost half, didn't it? It
Yeah.
started out with 524, and now it's over 1,500.
Yeah, and they're just cramming these kids into this old Walmart building. And the sad thing is that a lot of these boys came to the border by themselves, not even with their parents, because they were trying to escape gang violence in their home countries.
Mm-hmm.
But it would just be nice if the powers that be were focused on eradicating the cause of all these illegal immigration cases instead of punishing the terrified people that are trying to escape this violence.
Yeah.
It's really similar, and I'm not going to get on a rabbit hole on this topic, but it's very similar to the war on drugs, because people turn to drugs because they're having a really rough time in their life, and instead of giving these people therapy or trying to help them with the cause of their drug use, they throw them in prison for 10 years or more. So there's a bit of a comparison there, treating the symptoms and not the cause.
Just to go back about the Casa Padre, these kids, they range from 10 years to 17 years. They're all boys. They only get 2 hours a day to be outside. That's crazy.
Yeah, for young kids.
And they only get 2 phone calls per week.
Yeah.
These conditions do seem like a prison.
Yeah, well, they are. They're a government-owned, basically, farm for people.
And I believe that it was 74 hours are dedicated to medical testing and vaccination.
Now, I wonder if these kids have families coming to be with them, or if they're going to be eligible to be fostered out or adopted, or if they're just stuck in this limbo.
They also have like orange arrows on the floor that they have to walk on.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of strict rules in this housing place.
I just wonder what they do with the other 22 hours of the day. Only 2 hours they can be outside. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And limited amounts of shirts, and socks, like clothes. They can only have certain amounts of. It's just weird.
Yeah. It's just a really rough situation, and it seems to be an abuse of power. But to play devil's advocate, on the other hand, these immigrants are illegal, and according to the U.S. laws, they legally need to be held accountable. So it's just sad that it's a law to begin with, personally, I feel, and that's just where we are right now in this crazy political system. But
Right, there's no side to blame.
yeah, personally, I'm politically neutral, so I don't want to get into politics on this. I'm just sharing the stories and kind of the human factor behind these things, because it just really stuck out to me when I heard it on the news today. And I don't believe either side is 100% correct or pure in their intentions. I just wanted to share these stories and talk about how this separation that is too late to undo now could negatively affect these helpless children in the future. And sadly, for many of these families, they'd rather risk being arrested by the U.S. than stay in their hometown and get killed because they can't afford to pay off a gang to let them live for another month. It's a sad reality, and I think it's important to empathize with all people, no matter what country they're from. Land should not be more important than human lives, but throughout the course of history, it always has been. It's really sad to see the videos of the Republicans and Democrats arguing. If you want to see that, just look it up. You can hear people's thoughts on Trump's new order to not separate families. But it seems like if you're a human being with a heart, you're labeled as a leftist quack that doesn't care about the law. And if you're trying to uphold the law, you come across as an insensitive racist. So there's just two sides of it, and I can't say who's right or wrong, and it's obvious that Trump is struggling with the line between compassion and law as well, which is understandable. The sad fact is, it will never happen that all the people in America, let alone the world, will all agree on this or any issue. I personally hate the fact that borders even need to exist. Like Pocahontas said.
My favorite Disney princess, by the way.
Yeah. Do you want to say what Pocahontas said?
Well, I wish I could sing it. I don't think my voice will do it justice, but I'll try. It goes, "You think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim." There you go.
That was beautiful.
Thanks.
And that's what we live by. But seriously, why can't we all just get along? Why can't people just love and realize money and power doesn't make you happy? If people weren't always so quick to take offense or defense, they wouldn't be so freaking miserable. But I don't want to get preachy on here, and I definitely don't want to get into politics. I just feel for the children that have been traumatized in this mess, and hopefully I gave a fair perspective to each side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again and 100 times again, we are not on a side. We're completely politically neutral.
Yeah. So I just hope that this can get sorted out between the U.S. and Mexico without any children's lives being messed up. Like we said before, it can have some serious repercussions in the future from these kids being separated from their families, and that damage has already been done. You can't undo it now with a new piece of paper that was signed today, but at least I guess it's a step in the right direction to solving this issue. But yeah, that's just our opinion, and I don't really care what anyone else thinks about this topic, because it's a really sensitive one, and I don't think my viewpoint will change on it.
I think that everybody should be like Pocahontas.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you haven't watched that movie in the last 2 years, you should watch it.
Yeah, and go listen to some 60s hippies music about love.
Buffalo Springfield.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, people.
Well, now you've realized that we're hippies. No, I'm just kidding. We're not. We just want people to get along. And we're not saying that all people should have the same viewpoint either. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own viewpoint. Just
be nice.
Try to be understanding of other people and not.
I sound like a brat when I said that.
Just be nice. And not impose your viewpoints or take people away from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you, I'm kind of scared to hear feedback on this discussion because it is a very sensitive topic, but I just thought it would be interesting this week to cover something that's a little bit taboo and controversial.
Yeah.
And,
let's lighten it up a bit and tell them about our new merch.
Yeah. So we got some interesting merch that you could get if you visit our Patreon. The $1 level is just thank you for supporting the show. We appreciate it.
But not just thank you. It's like, thank you!
Yeah.
Like that.
I didn't mean to undersell it. I mean, that would be amazing and a really big deal if you did, and we would appreciate $1 just as much as we'd appreciate 100. But we're not going to send you anything if you at that level because postage alone.
Mm-hmm.
But for $2 a month, you'll get access to premium episodes, which are in the works. Hopefully, they'll be released monthly starting soon. Our $5 level, we're calling Watchdogs. Because we like to keep an eye on people that could be...
Because we thought it was catchy and cool.
Yeah, well, and it goes along with our podcast because we want to raise awareness of people that could be in danger and try to help do what we can to prevent people from being abused. But at this level, you'll get a Voice of the Victim circle sticker, 3x3. So
everybody loves a sticker.
Yeah, stickers. It's a pretty good size, 3x3, and you'll also get a Voice of the Victim postcard with a note from us.
You can put it on your fridge. You can show your friends.
Yeah, or you can just tell us that you want it to stay blank if you don't want any dumb ramblings from us on it. And if you want to use it for yourself. So $10 per month makes you an armchair investigator. This gets you the sticker and the postcard, and it also gets you a Voice of the Victim fridge magnet.
Ooh.
And in addition, I forgot to mention, $5 and $10 level, you not only get our premium episodes released monthly, but you'll get follow-up minisodes where we'll be posting follow-ups to cases we've already covered, just further discussion.
What a good deal.
Yeah. So, the $20 level is Crime Fighters. And this is the big kahuna.
What do you get in that, Ryan?
You get everything we mentioned before, but you also get a Voice of the Victim coffee mug.
Everybody loves a mug.
Yeah, mugs are pretty sweet.
It's so official when you have a mug.
Yeah, and that way you can stay awake while you're listening to our boring voices.
They're not boring.
That was a joke. I don't know why I make self-deprecating jokes. That's probably something I gotta work on. But anyway, definitely go check out our Patreon page because it's pretty exciting to get stickers. Am I right?
You're right.
If you want to follow us on Twitter at VOVPod. Follow us on Instagram at VOVPodcast. And you can email us at VOVPodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our show so you stay up to date on our show because we're going to keep working to make it more interesting. And also, we would really, really appreciate a review and a rating because we want to know what you enjoy about the show and we want to know what we can do better.
Yeah.
So let us know And
Yeah, we know that a lot of people haven't reviewed because we see how many people download this pod.
yeah, well, it could just be first-time listeners that are like, this sucks.
Why do you keep doing that?
I'm just trying to be reasonable because I've been creating things for a long time, and I know how many people just think stuff sucks.
Oh my god.
Hey, there's haters out there. It's a fact of life. You know what I'm talking about. So, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next week.